I still remember the first morning I walked into that house. The kind of house where the air feels cold, even when the fireplace is lit marble floors that echo every step, staff whispering like ghosts in the hall. I was 27, 6 months pregnant, and broke enough to take the job no one else could hold for more than 2 weeks. 2 little boys, Luke and Noah, silent since their mama died, and their father, Carter Hayes, a billionaire with grief carved into his face and anger sitting just beneath his skin. He didn't greet me kindly, not that day or the next. The first real scene between us is burned into my mind. Luke slipped on the polished floor and knocked into his brother nothing but a tangle of crayons and giggles, but when Carter came storming out of his office, it looked like chaos. "What the hell were you thinking?" he barked, his voice slamming off the walls. "You let my son fall. Are you blind or just careless?" I stood there on the rug, my belly between me and his rage, and whispered, "Mr. Hayes, please don't you dare talk back," he snapped. "Every nanny the same. Useless. You think being pregnant makes you special?" The boys' laughter died. Their eyes dropped to the floor. I swallowed hard and took it because arguing only meant more humiliation. But later, when Carter wasn't looking, I sat cross-legged on the rug and let Luke and Noah draw crooked hearts on my belly. I let them smear cookie batter across my cheeks, fold paper boats with their tiny hands. I didn't push them to speak. I just stayed. And then one afternoon, Luke whispered a word so rusty it cracked Daddy. Noah echoed him stronger this time. I turned and found Carter in the doorway, gripping the framed tears on his face. That was the first crack in his armor. It wasn't a straight line after that. The staff whispered behind my back. "She won't last a week," and the house manager, Mr. Collins, kept a little notebook of every slip I supposedly made. He loosened a garden gate one afternoon. I barely caught the boys before they slipped out. Another time during bath night, Noah reached for a toy and nearly went under again. I caught him, but Collins showed up in the doorway, shaking his head like he'd warned everyone. Carter's trust wavered. Mine did too. I'd lie awake at night, hand on my belly, telling my baby, "Stay strong. We can't leave them yet." And still between the scares, the boys bloomed. They whispered words. They giggled when I balanced blueberries on my nose. Carter began hovering in the hall, silent, watching me read to them. Sometimes I'd catch his eyes and see gratitude flicker, quickly replaced by guilt. He was learning how to be a father again, but too proud to admit it. Collins wasn't about to let that happen. He started planting accidents more boldly. A window left unlatched during a storm, a rake leaning just where small feet might stumble. Each time I lunged, pregnant belly and all, to snatch a child back from the edge. Each time Carter's face went pale with fear. "Do you want my children dead?" he roared, once his voice breaking. I wanted to scream back, but didn't. The twins clung to me like anchors, whispering, "Safe," even as Collins whispered careless into Carter's ear. The breaking point came in the garden. Collins thought he was clever, pushing a wheelbarrow so a rake would crash near Noah's feet. But Carter had started to watch with his own eyes. He saw Collins's foot nudge the wheel. He saw me grab Noah in time. When he came down the steps, his voice was low and deadly. "You dare endanger my sons. You dare sabotage the woman who's done more for them than any of us." Collins sputtered. "I was protecting the family's honor. She doesn't belong here." Carter froze at that word. Honor, and something in him snapped. "My sons don't need your twisted version of honor," he growled. "They need love, and she gave it to them when I couldn't. You're finished here." Collins was gone by nightfall, his car disappearing down the drive. But firing Collins didn't silence the world outside the gates. The staff still whispered. People in town started gossiping about the billionaire and his pregnant black nanny. Investors called. The board threatened his empire. For years, Carter had built everything on reputation. Now it was cracking because he chose to defend me. I watched him pace the study at night, staring at the portrait of his late wife, wondering if he was betraying her memory. Then came the gala, the first time the house had opened its doors since his wife died. Guests in glittering gowns, the twins rehearsing "Good Evening" like a magic spell. I stood in the shadows, proud but cautious. and through that crowd slipped Collins, cleaned up but reeking of revenge. He accidentally spilled a glass of wine across my dress and shouted for all to hear. This is what happens when the master places trust where it does not belong. For a heartbeat, the room turned on me, whispers darting like knives. I felt my cheeks burn, but before I could speak, Carter's voice boomed. Enough. He told the entire room what Collins had done, how I'd saved his sons, how the first words they spoke in 2 years were Daddy and Maya. If you call that scandal, he thundered, then your hearts are colder than the snow outside these walls. The twins, sensing the storm, whispered again, safe. The room went silent. Then applause rose like a wave. Security dragged Collins out, while Carter stood tall, shaking, but unbroken. That night, for the first time, I believed we might actually win. But the gossip didn't die. Reporters camped at the gates. Carter's board demanded he distance himself from me, or risk everything. He spent sleepless nights pacing, torn between fear and truth. I sat with the boys, reading softly, their small voices growing stronger each day. One morning he came into the playroom, dropped onto the rug, and started stacking blocks with them. The twins giggled and whispered Daddy's tower. It was clumsy and beautiful all at once. He looked up at me, eyes wet, as if realizing in real time what mattered. When the board delivered its ultimatum, he finally stood up. You speak of cost as if profit is worth more than my sons' lives, he said, walking out of the meeting. That afternoon he told me, they want me to hide you, but I chose you. I chose them. It may cost everything. I put my hand on his shoulder and said softly, then let it cost everything, because if you lose their trust again, you lose far more than any fortune. The press conference happened at noon in the grand hall. Cameras flashing, microphones waiting. Carter stood at the top of the staircase with Luke and Noah holding his hands. I stayed a step behind Alvarez beside me like a rock. He looked out at the reporters and began, not with excuses, but with a story. My sons lived in silence for 2 years, he said. Then she came. She brought love. She gave them their voices back. If you call that scandal, you're colder than the snow outside. He didn't dodge the hard facts. Yes, she's black. Yes, she's pregnant. Yes, she started as a nanny. But she saved my family, and I won't hide her to preserve a reputation built on fear. Someone shouted, and what of your late wife? Carter's voice cracked but held steady. Love doesn't die with death. It multiplies when we choose it again. Maya doesn't erase my wife. She carries her legacy forward by giving my sons what their mother would have wanted: joy and a future. And then Luke tugged at his sleeve, leaned into the microphone and whispered, Maya's safe. Noah echoed louder, Daddy's safe. Maya's safe. Their words carried across the hall like a verdict. Carter bent down, pulled them close, and said into the mic, out of the mouths of children comes the truth. Print your scandals if you must. I will rebuild if I have to, but I will not betray them again. After the reporters left, the house felt different, lighter, like it could breathe. The twins kept talking more each day. Carter threw himself into fatherhood with a mix of clumsiness and joy, baking cookies, reading bedtime stories, chasing them through the snow. Sometimes he'd glance at me, and the look in his eyes said more than words could. He'd finally chosen trust over fear. Even now, when I think back, I still feel the ache of those days, the humiliation, the whispers, the constant fear of losing everything. But I also feel the moment Luke whispered Daddy for the first time, the warmth of Noah's hand slipping into mine. Carter standing in front of a room full of people and saying out loud what the world didn't want to hear. That's the moment the mansion stopped being a tomb and became a home again. And I wonder, if you were in his shoes, would you have done the same? Would you risk your reputation to defend someone the world told you to throw away? Or would you listen to the whispers? Tell me in the comments. What do you think is stronger in the end? Reputation or love? And if you've ever seen someone judged by their color, their status, or their past, what happened when somebody finally stood up? Because stories like this aren't just mine, they're happening all around us, waiting for someone brave enough to tell them.